So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the tools that exist from the Unity store that you can actually pick up and use as part of development for creating and working inside of Unity for level design. One of the tools, this is one of the more popular ones, is the Pro Builder. It's currently on version 2. This one has a lot of great support, a lot of tools. It's not just a single tool, but it's multiple tools to allow you to do a lot of work inside it. Let me just kind of show you a couple of examples here. You can build geometry. You can also build and create your UV coordinates. You can apply textures to it, the materials to it, all within Unity. You actually don't have to leave. This one, again, it does a lot of good things inside of it. It is a full development level design tool set for Unity. A couple other options. There's a prototype tool. It's a free one. This one's a very simple one. Currently what it does is it only does geometry for the free version. So when you're placing it in, you can actually place and create a single texture across the object you make, and the next object you can make, you can place the whole texture. Your other option, this one's still kind of in development in terms of bugginess, at least based on reviews and elements, but it's definitely a good tool in terms of the direction that they're heading with it. Alright, and then this one also, there's a free version to test it out, and then there's a full version that you can purchase. Okay. Another one is a ProTile map editor. Basically more of a drag and drop and extrude on the geometry and place your textures and your objects and items. If you're working on a 2D game and you're looking for something to create geometry kind of on the fly and just build in the editor, then the FER2D is a really great one to use. Very simple to use and to pick up and just start working with. Another one that's for 2D and 3D is the Tidy Tile Mapper. It's a nice tool in order to get in, just to really drop in square blocks and create. Alright, so those are going to be your basic set of editor tools to kind of help you along with it. And then the one other element we'll look here at the moment is going to be the brushes. So for instance, the nose extra brushes is a free set, but it adds to all of your current Unity brushes for the editor and just allows you to do different types of strokes a little bit easier. So it's just kind of a quick overview of what's available for the editor side. When looking for a terrain engine inside of Unity, there's a couple of good ones to stick out in the store, ones that you might want to take a look at. They all come with demos. You can go through them and see which ones work for you. There's ones where if you're wanting to create an overhang, if you want to create a cave or a tunnel system, then using the voxel system is going to be what you want to actually look at and go with. The current ones that are kind of a good rank in terms of usage would be the TerraVox. This is a nice one to use for it. Comes with a lot of good tools and comes with a lot of good support with it. The other options for some of these, if you go to the Romoko, this one has a lot of nice setup for it as well. And again, be sure to test them out and see if you like them. And this is basically a different terrain system. So it's not necessarily just putting something on top of Unity's terrain. They're building these out with a totally different set of features and abilities. Alright, another type is if you're looking just for your standard Minecraft style, then you may like something similar to this. And then when it comes to the terrain itself, I just wanted to kind of point out that if you're doing anything for the terrain, there's a huge list of options and properties and abilities that can extend the current terrain system. So be sure that if you're going through it, take a look at it. You'll probably find something in here that you really want to use as an additive with it. So that's going to be all the parts and pieces to kind of extend the terrain system. For textures inside of the asset store for Unity, there's actually quite a few. Currently there's over 2,000 products, and then within each one could have potentially 10, 20 textures inside of them. This one, what I would suggest is just, again, like many of the other things, you need to get your head wrapped around what's available, what's not available. Great thing to go through, just go through your textures, look at your options and your list for them. There's a lot of individuals doing texture work. There's also a couple larger companies doing textures for this store as well. One of them is going to be the algorithmic, the substance textures. These, if you haven't used them before, is definitely worth looking at and going through. They're going to be textures that allow you to dynamically change elements to it. At runtime, or actually create images from it. Great set of materials. If you notice, the bar over here is very small. There's a huge list of textures from them. It's definitely one that's worth looking at. Good prices for them as well. Along with the texture side, there's the 3D models inside the store. When you're looking at trying to figure out what you want to put into your levels and what you want to use for it, this is one. For instance, a couple of these characters are great. The Unity assets for terrain, they start you off with a couple dozen models and textures to work with. If we were just kind of look at a few of these here, this one, for instance, is a free character that comes rigged and ready just to play with. You can have things like this one, full scene, which is actually just a nice fantasy game scene to get started with creating your own set, and even just finding out if you like to how you like to design levels and create things. And then the last thing is that there's also objects that are just simply small packs. For instance, rocks. If you just want to fill your scene with some rocks, you can just go here and grab some rocks. It's really great for prototyping as well, and make sure that you like where you're going with your scene and your environments. Let's go ahead and make sure you have your terrain selected. Up in the top, you have the settings, which we've already looked at once. You have a set of buttons. The first three are going to be controlled for the terrain height, up and down, and setting the height layer, height level. Then you have a brush for your texture option, and then you have an option to set trees and set objects. Let's go ahead and go to the texture first. That way we can put at least a base texture on here. The brush right here, if you left click on it. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that you have a set of default brushes. You can add to these by putting them inside of Gizmo, and we'll go over an example of this and go to the Unity store. They have some free brushes you can use. There's currently no terrain textures defined. There's a little button that says Edit Textures. If you click on Edit Textures, you'll get an option for Add Texture. Go ahead and left click on it. It's going to give you a window. This window is where you place in the textures you want to use for it. Now, we have a couple of textures we could use for it. Let's go ahead and click on Select so we can see them. Alright, so what we want to do, we just want to find some rock textures or a rocky type of texture that we could place into it. Let's see, we have a couple of them here. There we go. We'll start off with the cliff one. And then for the normal map for the cliff one, so go ahead and double click on that one. The normal map for that one, I don't think there's one for it. Let's see what we have down here. And we'll go ahead and we'll use it with the terrain dirt normal. See how that one looks. Terrain for the size, the scaling size of it. Let's start off with doing about a 6x6. We'll see how that works. Click on Add. Alright, so there we go. So now if you notice, everything got added to the terrain. Since it's the first texture in the list, it's going to spawn itself across everything here. So we've got the nice texture going with it. Now the plane right here, we could leave the plane if we think we're going to use it, but since we have the terrain in, I'm going to go ahead and select the plane and just push delete. Alright. If you click back on the terrain, let's add another texture to it. So edit textures, add texture, and then click on select. And then this time, let's take a look at some of the other options we have here. Let's go ahead and just load up a couple of good ones so that we don't really have to think about it. We can just click on a texture and use it. We'll do the terrain sand, and then go to the normal map and do the terrain sand normal map. And the scaling on that one, that looked pretty good. 6 or 5 would be a good size for X and Y right here. So we'll add that one to it. Now notice we get it added here. We don't have it over here because we don't actually, we already have the one texture assigned to the whole thing. Let's go ahead and do a couple more textures. Let's get all of our textures set up. We'll go back to the texture, and we have a terrain grass. So let's go ahead and click on the grass, and then we'll do the normal map for the grass as well. And then once again, 6 by 6. We'll try that for our numbers. Go back to edit textures and add. This will get you in a good habit, is that once we've gone through it so many times, you'll be able to remember it really easy as to which buttons you were pushing. We have some mud, we've got some terrain mud, we have a terrain dirt. Let's add the dirt one. And then we'll add the normal map for that dirt. Change our size 6 by 6, and you may put the texture 6 by 6 in this one, but then you do one where your terrain is bigger and it looks a little bit different. It's okay to actually have different sizes for each one. It's just all a matter of what you need for what project you're working on. Alright, so we have our textures loaded up. We have different brushes. When you have a texture selected, you'll see the highlight around it. If you don't see the highlight, you'll also just see a little bottom bar. Either one will let you know that you have it selected. Your choice of a brush, if you want to actually move the brush with a hotkey, it's the greater than, less than symbols, or the comma and the period. They'll let you cycle through so you don't have to click over there to it. And if you notice, like it being in the shadow here, you can kind of see it, is that when you change to it, you can see it right there. So you'll be able to see which ones you're switching to. The texture that you're using on this one, if I was to click on a different one here, so we're clicking on the second one we have, the brush size, if I grow this brush larger like this, then you'll see the size of it get bigger and smaller. You can take the brush is going to be how big it is. The opacity is how much it's actually blending, how much it's brushing onto the other surface. So for instance, if we were to take this all the way to 100, then this is going to be completely the other texture. So if you notice, this texture goes straight onto it. There's no blending except at the edges because of the brush type. But if I take my opacity and take it to, say, 50%, then when I actually stroke, if you notice right here, it's only if I do a single click, I'm only going to be, there we go, I'm only 50-50 between the two. So if you wanted to do something, for instance, where your brush is really big and you just single click, then you have a nice blend in between the two. See how they blend together? Alright. So there we go. So I'm going to take, and also just as a note, if your terrain, if you're working with it and your computer can't handle the texture resolution being set so high, you can set the textures down. That's just that's more of a preference of your computer. So just so that people do know, if you are working with it and your height map, your detail resolution, control, and base, if your computer's chugging, just be sure you set it down. Alright, so go back to our brush, and if you select the first one, you can take it back to the original layer. So I can go through here and do that with it, and then I can go back to our dirt one. Let's say, for instance, how about we say that over on the side over here will be water. So we could do a whole thing of just sand. painted in like this for a moment. Just kind of block in the shape that we think. So we're going to say that most of the stuff over here, when the user goes up and over the edge of the steps, they're going to see a sandy beach and going off into some water, to an ocean. There we go. So we've got nice sand, good detail texture on it. Alright. If we go to our grass, I'm going to take a little bit of time here, but we'll go to the grass. We'll do a little bit of a, we'll choose a brush like this one that has a little bit more of a rough edges to it. And then I'm going to take my opacity down just a bit more. So we could use the grass texture, and we could brush it on more as a path that can kind of help lead the player around. There we go. Alright. So we have a nice little grass path that goes all the way through here. And what I'm doing at the moment, I'm just blocking in the basic shapes with my brush as to where I want some of the general areas to be, so that when it comes to doing the pushing up and down the terrain pieces, I have a nice direction as to where I want to go and not go. When you start pushing up and down terrain, it can get a little bit confusing, and if you go ahead and block in where you want things, it's going to make your job a little bit easier. Alright, so we now have a nice little walking path that our player will go to before he gets up to here. And then we have the other texture here, and this one we may just add to it a little bit later. We'll kind of check on what our hills and our terrain is going to look like, but we can kind of get in a nice little sense of mud mixed with it. There we go. So it's starting to look pretty good. We'll have a nice little feel to it by the time we're done. We'll put a little mud right down here so it looks like people have been walking up and down this area. There we go. So that's going to be your basics when it comes to the texturing side. Again, we've blocked in the basic texturing here. We're going to start working in the geometry and pushing the terrain up and down and getting things set into place, and after that we'll go back to texturing and touch some more of the details of it.